and welcome to this week's episode of The Language Lady. I'm your host, Dr. Hemphill, and I'm so excited to be able to bring this topic with you today. I'm going to start talking about this new topic by having you ask the following questions. Have you ever asked yourself these questions?
My ELLs can't speak English.
My ELLs, they can't do the work in my class, and I can't speak their language. Help me, Dr. Hemphill, what do I do? My ELLs don't understand what I'm telling them. I know that they would be able to do the work if I could speak their language, but I don't speak their language. Help me. Help me, Dr. Hemphill. Can you help me, please? Well, I'm happy to tell you that there's an exciting movement going on in the United States. It's been happening for quite a while, and it's through a network called the Wida Consortium. And the Wida Consortium put out these standards in listening, reading, speaking, and writing that can be used for any school district, any school. And they're not to replace the already standards that you use in your classroom, but instead what it does is that it serves as an overlay for your standards. So it shows you the language needed for students to be able to meet the content standards in your district. So for example, if you're watching a TV show and someone who is hard of hearing or is hearing impaired watches that show, you're not going to change the content. You're just going to change the mode in which they're able to understand the content. So what you do is you have closed captioning. You're not changing the content. You're giving them access to the information. That's what the WIDA standards do for English language learners. Every school district is different, uses a different measure on how they determined that a student needs second language services or English language learner services. But if your state is part of the WIDA consortium, and I'm going to put a link below so that you can find out more about this incredible resource. Your school district is using the WAPT or the WAPT in order to determine if a student is eligible for English language learner services. But even if your child isn't, or your school district is not part of the WIDA consortium, I think that you will benefit a lot on the resources and ideas that I'm going to share with you in this video. In this video, I'm going to attempt to take you through the steps from the moment that a student walks into your building and is tested, and then what you do from there. But you would administer them the WAPT, and then the WAPT is going to give you a score. It's going to give you a score on their language level, overall proficiency level, whether they're 1 all the way to a 6. And also it will tell you their level in listening, reading, speaking, and writing. This is so important because what a student is able to do at a language level 1 is very different from what a student can do from a level 2, 3, up to 6. I also want to give out a disclaimer that 2 students or 3 students who are at a language level 1 are not necessarily the same, because even though their overall proficiency score is a 1, their speaking and their writing scores could vary. So you have to tailor their needs based on their listening, reading, speaking, and writing scores. If you're interested in learning more about what students look like and what they're able to do at each of the proficiency level, please go to a previous video that I made called Factors in Learning a Second Language, or Factors in Learning a New Language, I should say.
So in this pretend scenario, I'm going to introduce you to a girl named Paola, and she's originally from Brazil, and she's new to this country. She's can understand more than she's able to speak, and what she's also able to write. Since it's determined that Paola speaks another language, we give her the WAP test, and here are her results. She has a 1.5 in listening, 1.7 in speaking, a 1.1 reading, and then a 1.0 in writing. And it breaks it down. If you scroll all the way down, her overall score is a 1. So her overall score is basically an average of her listening, speaking, reading, and writing skills. This chart shows what she's able to do at her level. Since she's at level 1, we're going to only look at the green section. That shows what she's overall able to do in listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Feel free to press the pause button at any time so that you can take a deeper look and take your time in looking at all the levels. So today we're going to delve deeper into the can-do descriptors. We're going to look at what is the language of mathematics, the language of language arts. Also, we're going to look deeper into the language of social studies and what that entails. What can a student do in listening, speaking, reading, and writing of social studies, as well as the language of science. So everything that we look at has language. We usually think of language just with language arts, but it's everywhere. What I want you to do now is I want you to look at this apple, and I want you to look at it from a different point of view. I want you to describe this apple as a mathematician, as a scientist, as an artist, and also as a literary critic. So what did you notice? You noticed that you had to pull different vocabulary from these different subject areas. That's exactly what happens with our English language learners. In order for them to be successful in whatever content area they're learning in, they need to learn the vocabulary and the language function necessary to be successful in that particular content area. So the way the Wida standards operate is that there's a standard for every grade level from K through 12 and for every domain, listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and also for every content area that I mentioned prior. But each of these content areas or each of these standards have a pattern. Each have an MPI, which is a model performance indicator, and a strand. And I'm going to be talking about an MPI in a couple of minutes, but a strand means going from expanding all the way to bridging and reaching. So students starting at the beginning level and all the way. And then no matter which box you look at, what grade level, what subject area, each one is comprised of the same pattern. It has a language function, the type of support, and the content. So in this example, name familiar objects is the language function because that's what we want ELLs to be able to do. The type of support that they're going to be able to name familiar objects is with with photographs or illustrations. And then finally, the type of content area is weather conditions. So this is the same pattern over and over again. Model performance indicators cross all language areas as well as subject areas. So to recap, the levels are levels 1 through 6. Your domains are listening, reading, speaking, and writing. And then your model performance indicators are what's contained within every single box. So let's go back to our example of Paola from Brazil. She is in 3rd grade, so I'm going to look at the grade 3 to 5 cluster, and I'm going to look at the language of math and reading. I'm going to look at the language of math in terms of speaking. What is she able to say for her level? I'm also going to look at what she's able to do in writing. So this is what allows me to be able to meet her needs specifically. Here are more examples of interactive supports that I can use. I'm not limited to what's inside the box. And then here we have an example of the website, the landing page for the Wida Consortium. And on the right-hand side, there's free downloadables that you can have at your disposal so you can understand better how to help your ELLs.
So I hope this video enabled you to understand more deeply and more specifically on what the language is needed for students across all grade levels and subject and content areas. In next week's video, I'm going to go more into detail as to how to use that information when setting up your lesson plan and deciding how you're going to differentiate content for your students. So for example, if you're a math teacher, middle school math teacher or high school teacher, or if you teach math at the elementary level, how you can use this information that I just taught you today on how to specifically meet the content and deliver it in such a way that's meaningful for your English language learners based on their language level. Please comment below what levels of English language learners are in your classroom, and also what aids and resources do you use to enable them to understand your teaching. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time.